In 2012, a team from the University of Aberdeen dropped a camera and a baited trap into the Kermadec Trench, north of New Zealand, at a depth of roughly 7,000 meters. They were looking for deep-sea snailfish, small gelatinous creatures that had been photographed at that depth before, but never captured. What showed up instead were 7 specimens of something that hadn't been reported in nearly a century. Pale, translucent, nearly 30 centimeters long, roughly 10 times the size of a normal deep-sea amphipod. The largest one captured on camera was estimated at 34 centimeters. At 7 kilometers down, the pressure is roughly 700 atmospheres, enough to crush most man-made structures. The creatures were scavengers, drawn to the mackerel bait. They fed for hours. A week later, the team redeployed the equipment at the same site. Not a single supergiant amphipod appeared. They were there for a day, then gone. A 2025 study now estimates that these animals may inhabit 59% of the world's ocean floor. They're not rare, they're just everywhere we haven't looked yet. We've been talking about things collapsing above ground, buildings, bridges, infrastructure. Today, what's below? The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface, and we've mapped roughly 5% of the sea floor in any meaningful detail. The rest is running on whatever rules it established before humans existed. This is a video about the things we found down there that shouldn't be there, according to the models, the physics, or the general assumption that the bottom of the ocean is empty. It is not empty. It's an unpatched level in a game nobody has finished testing. The first thing you need to know about the deep ocean is that it has lakes, not metaphorical lakes, actual lakes sitting on the ocean floor, with shorelines, with waves, with their own distinct surface. They're called brine pools, and they form when ancient salt deposits dissolve into the surrounding water, creating pockets of extremely dense, hypersaline fluid that's 3 to 8 times saltier than the ocean above. Because the brine is denser than seawater, it sinks and pools in depressions on the seafloor, forming what looks, on camera, exactly like a lake at the bottom of a lake. The brine is toxic. Fish that swim into it go into shock within seconds, suffocate, and die. The edges of brine pools are lined with the remains of crabs, eels, and other creatures that wandered too close. Scientists call these death pools without a trace of exaggeration. But at the very border, the thin chemical gradient between the brine and the normal seawater, extremophile bacteria thrive. Mussels cluster. Tube worms grow. Life doesn't avoid the death pool. Life sets up camp at its edge, feeding on the chemical gradient like it's a buffet counter at the boundary of a toxic waste site. The deep ocean doesn't follow the rules you'd expect. It writes new ones. Below the brine pools, deeper still, is the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld, which tells you how biologists felt about it. The Hadal Zone starts at 6,000 meters and extends to the deepest point on Earth, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, at 10,935 meters. For context, if you dropped Mount Everest into the Mariana Trench, the summit would still be over 2 kilometers underwater. The pressure at the bottom is roughly 1,086 atmospheres, over 1,000 times the pressure at sea level. No sunlight reaches the Hadal Zone. The temperature hovers just above freezing. And yet the Mariana Trench is not empty. In 2012, James Cameron's solo dive to the bottom filmed amphipods, sea cucumbers, and shrimp-like organisms living in what should be one of the most inhospitable environments on the planet. In 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo reached the bottom and found a plastic bag and sweet wrappers. We've been to the deepest point on Earth 4 times in human history. Plastic got there before us. The organisms that survive at Hadal depths do so by breaking the rules that work everywhere else. Their cell membranes are built differently, more flexible to resist the compression. Their proteins fold into shapes that are non-functional at surface pressure. Some Hadal species literally cannot survive if you bring them to the surface. They're not adapted to depth, they're adapted to pressure, adapted so thoroughly that normal conditions are lethal to them. The deep ocean doesn't just have life, it has life that only works there. Organisms evolve for an environment we need billion-dollar machines to visit for a few hours. While we're in the Hadal Zone, the giant isopod, If you've seen pictures of one, you know why it's on this list. It looks like someone scaled a wood louse to the size of a football and gave it a suit of armor. Bathynomus giganteus can reach over 50 centimeters in length. They live between 170 and 2,140 meters depth, scavenging dead fish and whale carcasses on the seafloor. In 2023, researchers in the Gulf of Mexico documented a giant isopod that had been fasting in captivity for over 5 years without dying. 5 years without food. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but the working hypothesis is a combination of extremely low metabolic rate and the ability to store massive energy reserves relative to body size. In a game design context, that's a mob with a 5-year idle timer that still aggros when you drop loot. The deep ocean has different balance settings. In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded the loudest underwater sound ever detected. They called it the bloop. It was picked up by hydrophones across the Pacific, instruments originally deployed during the Cold War to track Soviet submarines, and was several times louder than any known biological source. The frequency profile was consistent with the living creature, which is how the bloop entered popular culture, as evidence of something enormous and unknown living in the deep ocean. The internet loved it. The Lovecraft comparisons wrote themselves. The actual explanation, published in 2005 and confirmed with additional data, is arguably stranger than the creature theory. The bloop was an ice quake, the sound of a massive section of Antarctic ice shelf fracturing and calving into the ocean. The sound traveled thousands of kilometers through water. The reason it sounded biological is that ice, when it fractures at that scale, produces frequency patterns similar to living organisms. The deep ocean didn't contain a monster. The Antarctic ice sheet was breaking, and it sounded like one. The ocean also has rivers, underwater rivers, channels of water flowing along the seafloor, distinct from the water around them, with banks, currents, and their own ecosystems. The largest known submarine river was discovered in 2010 at the bottom of the Black Sea, a flow of highly saline water from the Mediterranean moving along the seafloor at roughly 4 miles per hour, with its own current, its own carved channel, and sufficient volume that if it were on land, it would be the 6th largest river in the world by flow rate. It has waterfalls, underwater waterfalls. Dense water cascading over ledges on the ocean floor exactly the way water cascades over cliffs on land, except the entire system is submerged. The Denmark Strait Cataract, a waterfall between Iceland and Greenland, drops roughly 3,500 meters, making it more than 3 times the height of Angel Falls, the tallest waterfall on land. It moves roughly 5 million cubic meters of water per second. It's been running continuously for longer than human civilization has existed. Nobody sees it. 5% mapped. The supergiant amphipod, first described in 1899, lost for a century, found at 7,000 meters, gone the next day, and now estimated to inhabit most of the world's ocean floor. Brine pools that function as chemical ecosystems at the boundary of a death trap. A trench deeper than any mountain is tall, inhabited by organisms that shouldn't survive the pressure but do, and littered with human garbage that got there ahead of us. A sound that scared the internet into believing in sea monsters, produced by the Antarctic ice sheet announcing its own disintegration. Rivers that flow under the ocean, with waterfalls taller than anything above the surface, running since before humans learned to build boats. We've explored 5%. The thing about the ocean isn't what we found, it's that we've barely started looking, and the 5% we've seen already broke most of our assumptions about what can exist, where life can survive, and how physics works when nobody's watching. The ocean is the largest habitat on Earth, and it operates like an unpatched level, full of mechanics we haven't documented, physics interactions we haven't tested, and creatures that exist outside the parameters we thought were fixed. The patch notes haven't been written yet. We haven't even finished the tutorial. The ocean hides things, but the deadliest thing in the ocean isn't a creature, it's a chemical.